Welcome to Cooking in Quarantine with your host, Benjamin Rosas. Today is St. Patrick's Day, which is a little bit awkward since all the bars are closed. Nobody can go anywhere. Trying to have a festive St. Patrick's Day all alone is a little bit challenging. I am wearing my kilt, but I know what you're thinking. Isn't that a Scottish kilt? Yes, it is. But as my Scottish grandmother and my Mexican grandfather would tell you, if you mix Scottish and Mexican, you get Irish. That's just how it works. So to honor the Mexican side, I'm going to take a shot of tequila. Then we can get started. Happy St. Patrick's Day. So I'm not cooking anything right now. What I'm doing is preparing to ferment sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is really easy and really cheap, and it's a great way to preserve a whole bunch of cabbage and have it for a long period of time. Doesn't even need to be refrigerated, and furthermore, it's full of nutrients and helps your immune system. There's only two ingredients, cabbage and salt. I draw a lot of inspiration from Sandra Katz, who wrote The Art of Fermentation, among other books like Wild Fermentation. He is a really interesting person. You should definitely check out those books. I had the chance to do a workshop with him once in Olympia, and that was really cool. We did something kind of like this. So basically, I got these two big cabbages and I'm chopping them up. You can slice it as thick or thin as you like. You could even shred it if you have the means to grate or shred. But I'm just going to use this big old chef knife and see what damage I can do that way. You can ferment a lot of other vegetables in the exact same way as sauerkraut. You can do this with beets. I've done it with beets and turnips and things like that are very popular. Carrots, parsnips, radishes. There's really no vegetable that you can't ferment, although some of them will just turn out with better texture and flavor than others. Like, I probably wouldn't want to do it with potatoes, but I'm sure there's other things you could ferment potatoes into. It seems like there's some culture with some history of fermenting just about everything imaginable in the world, including fish and meat and cheese. And so many of the things that we take for granted come from fermentation cultures and fermentation history around the world. So sauerkraut isn't really Irish in particular, but when I think of Irish food, I think of like a Reuben with sauerkraut on it, or corned beef and cabbage and that sort of thing. So sometimes for St. Patrick's Day, I will spend a couple of weeks making a sandwich, because I will ferment sourdough to make the rye bread, ferment the sauerkraut, and brine the corned beef. That's what I'd like to do right now. But if I get started now, it'll be done in about 2 weeks. How short or long you leave something to ferment is a bit of a matter of taste, or maybe necessity. The longer it goes, generally gets a bit more sour. Eventually, it could spoil, especially if there's some kind of oxygen. But for the most part, I think home fermented sauerkraut can stay good for probably months. Use your senses. The thing is, it's so delicious, it won't last that long anyway. Great. That's the whole red cabbage. Now I'm going to weigh it, because I want to weigh the salt to be about 1.5% the mass of the cabbage. So if I have a kilo of cabbage, I'd want 15 to 20 grams of salt. Some people put caraway seeds in their sauerkraut or other little spices like that. Today I'm being kind of lazy and I'm just going to do it au naturel, only cabbage and salt. The cabbage will exude a bunch of water. The salt pulls a lot of water out of the cabbage, and you kind of mash it down a little bit to push more water out. So it ends up creating basically a saltwater brine with its own liquid. However, if you don't get very much water out of the cabbage, or it's kind of dry, you can add more water. At first the cabbage takes up a lot of room, but as it wilts, and lets out its liquid and breaks down with the salt, it becomes a lot smaller and easier to contain. I'm hoping to fit everything in this jar. I have this nice gram scale that I got forever ago for like 40 bucks. Get one, it's totally worth it. Use it for baking, use it for everything. If you don't want to weigh it, you can guess, look at the grocery store receipt, and use about, I don't know, a teaspoon per pound or something like that. It really doesn't matter like a precise ratio. Some people like it a bit more salty. You just need enough salt to pull the moisture out and keep things well preserved. So that's about a kilogram. If you tell me to use the English or imperial scale and not the metric scale on St. freaking Patrick's Day, you're asking for it. Okay, so that's about 2 kilos, 2,000 grams, so 15 or 1.5% of that is 30 grams of salt. Great. I might even add a little bit more salt, just because I really want to make sure that these things get the chance to wilt and secrete that nice cabbage water and create a brine. So I'm mixing it with my gloved hands. You can also use like a wooden spoon and kind of do a little damage to the plants. It's alright. You want to kind of bruise them and macerate them a little bit and get the water to come out and get the salt to kind of mix in and get that brine going. And it just takes time too. I might leave this for 20 minutes and come back and see if it's released more liquid. A little more salt. Here. Alright, now I think the salt is pretty well spread out. So I'm going to let that sit and see if it begins to ooze that nice brine that I'm looking for. We'll revisit that in a little while. So we're back, and now I'm going to do some corned beef. So I found this brisket on sale at Whole Foods when I was fever prepping, and it was like half price because, you know, a lot of people aren't really going all in for St. Patrick's Day. Well, this guy is. So I'm going to corn a beef myself, and I'd rather just get a nice brisket from the butcher. This is already kind of wrapped. Looks like it has some spices in there and stuff. I'll probably just rinse it off and start fresh because I want to do my own brine. I follow a brine recipe from Alton Brown. You can look up Alton Brown's corned beef brine online. And depending on how well you prepped, you might actually have some of these ingredients, although you probably don't have all of them. I'm going to start with a liter of water. And I'm just going to add a bunch of spices to this and bring it to a boil. Let's see, we want 12 ounces of salt. Get that out. That is a lot of salt, but the point is, you know, you don't consume the brine. The brine is just there as sort of a vehicle for first drawing a bunch of the liquid out of the beef and then replacing it with all the spicy flavor liquid that you've created through the magical process of osmosis. That's why you need all the salt. If you don't put all that salt in there, you won't get the osmosis to happen as effectively as you could. So then, let's see, half a cup of brown sugar, roughly speaking. That looks about right. Okay. Now the most interesting ingredient of all, in my opinion, is the saltpeter, the potassium nitrate. A lot of stores don't like to sell this anymore because apparently it's a lethal explosive and is used to make bombs and whatnot. Black gunpowder. Potassium nitrate, KNO3. I found it on a lab on Etsy because I am a mature person and that's what I do. I'm going to take 4 teaspoons of this. Now this is optional. You can use other types of pink salt, pickling salt, brining salt. Most of them are some variation of sodium nitrate. That's fine, but the potassium nitrate will make the corned beef pinker, redder, more sort of lush, and it's, you know, it's kind of fun to use it. So, you know, never know, it could blow up. Also, there's a lot of rumors out there that potassium nitrate is like anti-libido drug that, you know, they gave to soldiers in order to keep their sex drives low. I don't buy that. I don't think that's founded scientifically, but also it's like I'm in quarantine, so I mean, if it kills my libido, it's probably only going to help. Let's see, cinnamon, a stick of cinnamon, a teaspoon of mustard, mustard seeds, brown or yellow, filling that, a half teaspoon of ground mustard powder, a teaspoon of peppercorns, black peppercorns, I have those right here. 8 cloves, 8 allspice berries, and 12 juniper berries. That's about 8. None of these are precise. You can kind of mix and match. You can, I'm sure, leave a few things out as long as you don't leave out the salt. And just kind of go with the flow. That looks like about 12 juniper. Yeah, I don't think I use these for anything else. So I've probably had them since last St. Patrick's Day. 8 allspice. And a couple bay leaves. And a half of a teaspoon of ground ginger. Bay leaves. Oh yeah, here we go. Always gotta have some bay leaves. Finally, so I'm gonna bring this to a simmer and let everything simmer out. And then I'm gonna throw ice in there and cool it off in the fridge. And then I'm gonna only add the beef to the cold brine. So I'm only boiling it to basically mix it and build the brine. But once it's been mixed up, I actually want it to be cold before I add the beef to it because I don't want it to cook the beef. I just want the beef to soak in it gently for several days. So I'm gonna cook that up and we'll come back in a minute. All right, welcome back. We are gonna revisit the cabbage and see how it's coming along. So not much to see. I mean, it looks wet, which is what I want. I'm gonna glove up. Even though I'm here by myself, you just don't want to take chances. So it's been sitting there, it's been kind of macerating in the salt, it's been releasing its juices. Salt draws liquid out of things. You know, if you cover a vegetable, especially a cut vegetable in salt, it's gonna release a bunch of liquid. That's what we've got going on here. It's looking really good. I'm gonna taste it just to make sure I didn't move the decimal point on the salt by accident. Oh, it tastes salty, but not like insane. All right, it tastes pretty good. So now I'm going to squeeze it all into this jar as much as I can. And kind of want to crush it. You know, I want to really like compress it. Sometimes people will take weights, stones, or full jars or canned goods to kind of weight down and push down on their fermenting vegetables. Because you sort of want to submerge all the vegetable matter under the water, under the brine, so it's not out in the air, it's all kind of in an anaerobic environment in the salty brine. So to that end, I really don't mind crushing and squeezing the cabbage down. Plus I want to fit it all in this jar, and I think I can. It's not even half of it yet, so let's see. You don't have to make it airtight. If it's airtight, you risk the jar exploding if it's left alone for a long time and really gets going. So it's kind of dangerous to ferment things in airtight glass jars, whether it's ginger ale or whatever. But I'm gonna make this just loose fitting on top, probably not airtight. Okay, I'm running out of room, so I'm just gonna really mash. There. Another good reason to wear gloves. This is easier to do if you really get your hands in it. If you don't have a jar like this, a ceramic crock is good. Mason jars work. I mean, kind of anything as long as it's not metal. You really prefer ceramic, earth, and glass. Metal can react with the acid of the brine, the acid of the fermenting organisms. There we go. It's all in. It's just perfect. Now I know a 2-kilo red cabbage fits in my jar. If this is 2 quarts, it's about 1 kilo per quart. I'm gonna check on this tomorrow morning and push it down some more and just try to make sure that the top is being submerged under a layer of liquid. And if it's not, I'll add some water to make sure. I don't want the top drying out or getting oxygen. Too much oxygen. Great, thank you. And we will take a look at the next thing, sourdough. All right, while the corned beef brine comes to a simmer, I'm going to be in the third and last chapter of our St. Patrick's Day Cooking in Quarantine episode. And that's the sourdough. This is the easiest part. It's really quite simple. I don't need a scale, I don't need a recipe. It's flour and water and time, really. Time is the important ingredient here, as is observation. So a sourdough starter is like a pet, but it's more like a goldfish than like a puppy dog. You can kind of ignore it most days, feed it a little bit here and there, and basically keep it alive. And if you ever have to go on a vacation or aren't just going to be tending to it for a while, you can throw it in the refrigerator or even the freezer for like a pretty long time and resuscitate it. Where does the yeast come from? Well, it's in the air, it's all around us, it's already in the flour itself. So the yeast will find a way to get a foothold and grow, as well as the bacteria that are in the air. Lactobacillus, I believe. So Sandra Katz, again, wild fermentation, suggests almost equal parts flour and water, but maybe a little more flour than water. I like to say it should be the consistency of pancake batter. It's kind of what you're looking for. I'm just going to mix some flour and water together and smooth it out. That's really all there is to it. If the flour is not bleached, that's better, because that bleach or chlorine might kill some of the yeast. I am using Dakota-made flour from Fargo. If you're in the upper Midwest, you can find this at Whole Foods, places like that. It's not expensive. Unbleached, unbrominated. So I got some flour, I got some water. I'm using filtered water because, again, I don't want chlorine or fluoride or whatever killing my yeast. If you don't have unfiltered water or unbleached flour, the yeast will still find a way. One way or another, the yeast will prevail, so it's just better this way. That was too much water, I can tell already. Nonetheless, yeah. So, more flour. It's really as simple as that. Now, in order to give it time to sort of breathe and develop and maybe catch some fresh bacteria and yeast from the air, what I like to call airware. I'll put a kitchen cloth over it or something, mesh, cheesecloth. Let it breathe a little bit, but I don't want, you know, flies or other animals to find their way in. There we go. That's looking a little bit more like Grandma's pancake batter. Smooth it out. And that's pretty much it. So at that point, what I would do is just put a clean kitchen towel over it and stir it every couple days. Feed it a little tablespoon of flour here and there until it starts to kind of bubble and smell good, and then it's ready to use. It should only really take a few days to be ready. If you keep it somewhere kind of warm, 68 degrees and up, it'll probably happen faster. Then, but I don't need to do that because I already have a sourdough start. Actually, this one here is like 1.5 years old. Whew! You smell that? It smells like a little bit like yogurt and like rotting ripe fruit and like fresh beer. Great. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to seed the new sourdough with the old sourdough. So usually what you do over the period of time is you just take a spoonful of the old sourdough and mix it with the fresh flour and water, and then that gets the new flour and water mix going, and you can discard the rest of the old sourdough. You just keep seeding new flour and water batches with a spoonful of the last batch, and it kind of keeps it alive indefinitely. What you don't want to do is just keep feeding the old one and letting it kind of get putrid over a long period of time without refreshing it. You really want to start with fresh flour and water and just a little bit of the old one to get the fresh flour and water going. That way you don't have a bunch of like really old kind of sour flour hanging around for months and months. You're dealing with mostly fresh flour most of the time. Just want some of that magical mystery sauce from the old batch. There we go. Great. So since I already have a nice sour start there, this should happen pretty quickly, maybe overnight. I might even be able to make bread with it tomorrow, by the next day for sure. So that's that. Just gonna wrap it up, set it aside. So it looks like this is done simmering. I'm gonna skip the boring details, but basically I'm just gonna throw ice on it, let it cool, and add the beef. I did rinse the beef from whatever random brine was kind of in the packaging. And I'm gonna throw it in the cold brine with ice cubes in the fridge, leave it for about 5 days. So thank you for watching. This has been a lot of fun, the inaugural episode of Cooking in Quarantine with your host, Benjamin Roses. Please tune in again and be sure to subscribe.